Hi friends! Today is the day covering my holy grail makeup brushes. This was hard. This is harder than the makeup version. I think it's because I have so many makeup brush favorites that it's ridiculous. And this does not mean that the brushes that I do not mention in this video are trash, because I can guarantee that I have several favorites in each makeup brush category that I can name, but I wanted to edit this down as much as I could, like I did with my makeup video, because again, I could go on and on and on about holy grails and favorites. I have so many of them, but I just made it so if I were left with these brushes and all the ones that I had just vanished, will I be okay? And would I have the tools to still create a beautiful makeup look? The answer is yes. And if it's your first time here, hi, I'm Alicia, an online coach who not only coaches but teaches classes online, specializing in flexibility and bodyweight training. I like to help people obtain sustainable nutrition and movement habits, but I also love food. And we'll kick off the list with complexion. If you haven't noticed, I have the timestamps and the chapters here on the time bar, but more importantly, I will have the entire name of the brush, number, and letter, because I try to remember all the time, but sometimes all the time I fail if you need the specifics for each brush. So just so you know, it'll be in the timestamps down below. This was hard for foundation because I have so many foundation brushes, synthetic, natural blend, but I knew that my holy grail foundation brush pick had to come from Sonia G's Fusion series. This is Sonia G's classic base, and it is a mixture of natural and synthetic. And Alicia, why would you pick half synthetic, half natural? I personally believe that is the best of both worlds. The bundle power in the Fusion series, the fact that you get durability from the synthetic fibers but a natural finish from the natural fibers, I think is just a perfect harmony of a complexion brush. And I personally love to buff my foundation in a circular fashion, and as you see here is a round ferrule domed at the top, and the shape for me is perfect for both foundation and under eye. So if I needed to rely on one brush for both concealer and foundation, as well as cream bronzer and cream blush, this brush head size can cover multiple tasks. It's versatile, but again, the standout feature for me is the bundle combination of synthetic and natural. It's not too dense, but not too flimsy either. It leaves behind a natural finish on the skin. If you want more coverage, then you can apply more product, but because you have the natural hairs in here, it will still take away some product. But the synthetic fibers, I think, enhances its durability. You can wash this more often than you would a natural hairbrush, but I understand synthetic brushes, again, just have that upper hand in you being able to wash them more often, especially if you are a working makeup artist. But if just on yourself, the Fusion series, oh my gosh. But I had to pick one, and I do love the classic base over jumbo base because, again, I love to apply my foundation in that circular fashion, and I think the brush head size and shape is more versatile than the jumbo base. And just so you can see, this is the jumbo base, this is the classic base. I personally, again, prefer to apply my foundation in that fashion and can be used for concealer. But for the concealer brush, again, many favorites, had to stay in the Fusion series, and this is the Jumbo Concealer. Recently, Sonia G released her Jumbo Worker in her Kiyaki set, and compared to the Jumbo Concealer, the Jumbo Concealer actually is smaller, but I love like this paw effect that it has on the skin. It's small enough to stay under the eyes because as of late, well, I wouldn't say that, maybe like for the last year or two, I haven't been applying a ton of concealer under my eyes. I've been conservative with the coverage, and to have a brush this size maneuver well under my lash line, around the nostrils of my nose, I just think is perfect. And as I explained with the classic base, to have a combination of synthetic and natural fibers, I think is ideal for a complexion brush, especially it has such a plush feeling on the under eye skin. It doesn't feel stabby or prickly, but it has the right amount of feedback. It's not flimsy, but it's not too overly dense. And again, the synthetic and natural combination leaves behind and takes away that perfect ratio of products, so the under eyes don't look overwhelmed with makeup, and it works well with either cream concealer, liquid concealer. I would actually tap in powder if you wanted. Yes, the jumbo concealer is a little dense, but why not? It's still soft enough where you could pick up a lightweight powder like the Charlotte Tilbury or the Pat McGrath under eye blurring powder, and it will set perfectly without looking overly dusty. Okay, while we're at it, I do prefer to use a natural brush with powder products, and this was hard because it was between these two, the Yano Series 06 brush and the Sora large eyeshadow brush. You can see they look like paint brushes. They have the pointed tip. These are both made with squirrel hair, and I prefer a squirrel hair for under eyes because it's just very soft on the skin, and squirrel hair doesn't have the same pickup as goat hair. It has less, so it leaves behind a beautiful veil-like finish on the skin. And I was toggling between the two because, as you see, they both have the same shape, but the Sora brush is slightly bigger, a little more dense, right? It still has that pointed tip, and the Yano Series brush is smaller. But I like the smaller size because it's just perfect for the under eyes, and that the tip trails beautifully under the lash line. It doesn't feel scratchy, and again, because the squirrel hair is just so lightweight, and I think ideal for powder products across the board, the amount of powder you can place under the eyes won't look powdery and dry under the skin. And because of the brush length, you can whip around powder if you wanted on other regions of your face that are not large, but I think especially if you are drier but you still like to apply powder here between the brows, around the nostrils of your nose, maybe here around the jawline where you like powder, but again, if the brush is too thick, dense, if it picks up too much product, the skin could look dry and overly powdery. That's why I prefer this type of a brush, and I do jump between them, but I find myself using this brush very much so for under eye powdering. And we're not into the cheek category yet, we'll be there soon. I love for powder highlighter because the brush is small. It's just great to get here right at the cheekbone. It's not going to overwhelm that region, it being too shiny and metallic, and you could buff the edges if you wanted. Heck, you could even finish off your blush if you applied your blush first and then followed with the highlighter. You can use the same brush to just blur the edges. So again, the pointed tip squirrel brush is just my go-to for all the tasks I mentioned, and it does them beautifully. Next up, we have blush, bronzer, and whatever else I like to apply. I actually haven't been applying powder all over my face as of late. Maybe that will change. That's a seasonal thing. But I've been reaching for this brush for my blush, bronzer, or whatever I wish to apply on my cheeks for a very long time. And this was hard because I have a ton of cheek brushes that I absolutely love, but I have to give it to the Houkodou Nagi NF1 powder brush. This is a round ferrule, and it is a Squirrel and Sokohogo blend, which for me is chef's kiss for cheek products, because as I explained with squirrel hair on the under eye business, squirrel hair is just so soft on the skin, not aggressive as a pickup from goat hair, but you still have a little bit of the goat hair for that pickup. Again, that perfect balance with blend, air-light texture, and pigmentation is still soft on the skin, and the brush head size, I feel fantastic. If you want that nice kind of big blush serving on the cheeks, if you want more of a serving on the cheekbones, whether it be blush or bronzer, but I just love how it envelops my cheeks and how I can place the brush on its side and kind of nudge bronzer here in a way that will still look precise, maybe not super precise, which I don't mind because I've been gravitating towards that approach for the summertime, just having that enveloped serving of blush and or bronzer, and the round brush size delivers that for me perfectly, and it feels foolproof to use, not only with my cheek products, but if I wanted to apply loose or pressed powder all over my face, I could, with the same brush. It's not too soft or not too rough either, again specifically for cheek products, but I would understand if you're drier and more sensitive to goat hair that you would just use an all-exclusive squirrel hair brush for sure. I have a ton of favorite squirrel hair brushes, but for me, I love a squirrel and goat hair blend because for cheek products, that blend, that blur, the way it just buffs powder into the skin, but it doesn't disrupt your foundation. It just kind of glides over the skin, gives that perfect serving of makeup, and leaving behind just a beautifully buffed finish. While we're at powder, and this brush, because I think because of what it is and the fact that it's only available every 5 years, just that prestige about it made it a holy grail. And yes, I don't use it often because it's just so expensive. Maybe one of my most expensive brush purchases, but it is the Koyudo red squirrel powder brush. I don't know if you can just feel the vibe through the screen. This brush is, listen, I don't know if I felt anything softer than this, and I would gravitate towards a soft bristle like red squirrel or blue squirrel for finishing for loose powder, because I found back when I was heavier with the makeup and just kind of plopping it on, I would overdose on the loose powder or pressed powder, and it was usually with a goat hair brush. And while I understand that has a purpose, if you want the coverage, if you want the longevity, maybe, you know, if you're performing, you need to pack on the powder, so you need a heavier brush. For me, and especially with it being warmer, if I were to apply loose powder, I would want a brush that would just leave behind more of like an airlight finish and won't pick up as much product and won't move my foundation. I mean, this just swims over your skin and makeup. And also, if you needed to finish everything once all has been applied, it doesn't move anything. It won't leave behind splotchy archy, okay? It would just look more buffed and blurred and perfected. So yeah, this brush stays in the drawer a lot. But again, because of the limited availability, the red squirrel, the wood that is made, I believe this is the Yakusugi series that uses a special Japanese cedar tree for the handle. So again, the prestige. And if you have a red squirrel brush, sound off down below, because my gosh, the level of softness and silkiness, I can't even explain it. I can't even explain it. I'm not even going to try to. We have now moved on to eyes. This was tough. As you know, I love my eyeshadow palettes. I love using multiple eyeshadow brushes at once, although I know that's not the most practical approach, especially if you're one that doesn't even use eyeshadow. Like, forget it, this is where I click off the video. But I wanted to whittle it down to these 6-ish, maybe 5. Let's start with the blender. And I made a whole video about my shader brush collection, how I favor that shape for myself, the day where I want one and done eyeshadow looks. Relying on one eyeshadow, I need a brush that's going to lay down the color on my lid, but will also blend it through the crease and maybe place some color under the lash line. Okay, great. If I'm just approaching this from, okay, I want a blender brush that's going to place a shadow through my crease first, I always grab, no matter what, and sometimes I look for it if it's not in front of me, the Rephr 27. This is different from the 16 and 15. My apologies for the dirty bristles. It's slightly more rounded than those brushes, and it's not as tightly packed. This just has an air whipped feel when blending matte powders through my crease, and I adore just how easily diffused the powders look. It's effortless. And when I use other blenders, you know what, I'm just gonna show you. I love my Houkodou GSN 10. It reminds me of the Rephr 27, but the Rephr 27 is slightly longer bristled and there's a little bit more of a splay. So keep in mind, I think my eye shape, that's the bias where I'm coming from. I do prefer a slightly longer, wider shape for my blenders. But again, you can see this is kind of the type of brush I reach for when blending through my crease, as opposed to one that's more tapered. This is a Bristol's Beauty Blender brush, but it's a little thicker and it doesn't have the same movement as the 27, and I much prefer more movement and flow when placing a matte powder through my crease. I just think it blurs the color beautifully and it sets up the eye look well. So this brush, again, I just love. Just look at it, look at it. And when all is said and done, I could take this brush on the very edges of what I applied prior and it will just still buff and blur, so it looks just perfect. And this one was hard because I evolved my technique the more fude I owned and practiced with, and I found the brush that I prefer to use when placing a deeper shade on my outer lid is a fluffy shader. This is the Houkodou Sora series, I think the G2. This is made out of Canadian Squirrel. You can see based on the color and the gradient, it's flat on both sides but has a beautiful flow and fluff to it. So for two things, I love to use this brush to place color on the outer lid in just a softer fashion than goat hair. Goat hair, listen, if you want to pack on color, if you want a bolder approach to your eye makeup, then maybe goat hair, maybe synthetic for sure if you're using those intense pigments, because those colors stain undyed bristles and tough to wash out. So that's another conversation altogether. But for the softer shadows like the Visearts of the world, even the Pat McGraths and Natasha Denonas, this type of brush, at the same time it places color on the outer lid, it diffuses it at the same time. Just tapping color here, not even going for the swirl and twirl, it just softly deposits that color and you don't have to do a thing. That's why I love Canadian Squirrel, because it has great pickup, but once you place this brush on your skin, the tap itself just diffuses the color. And because it's flat on both sides, you could place color here on the lower lash line, and you can place color here on the lid, swirl and twirl through the crease if you're going for a one and done moment, like I spoke about before. So this brush is just perfect for those tasks. And again, I found myself using fluffy shaders to place more deep colors on the outer part of my eye. I kind of want to do that now just to show you. So hopping in Tina's Tropic Color Palette collaboration with Cindy Grace, taking Maroon very lightly here, and without doing much, I'll tap on the outer part of my lid and allow the brush just to kind of buff the edges all on its own. It's not about over manipulating the color, and once you get the majority on the outer lid, you could just use light whisking motions to blend the edges so that it just looks a little more cohesive, and then you're done. You're done. And this is why I adore smoky shaders, because especially if you're a beginner and you're not comfortable with swirling and twirling, like some of you had said, I don't really get that technique, I try to practice it, I don't understand. Just having a brush that's flat on one side and you can just place the color right here on the outer lid and use these whisking motions to blend the edges without actually having to worry about something super advanced, right? There's no swirling and twirling, they're just patting and pulling, and it's soft enough that it doesn't feel rough on the skin, and you're done. And this brush specifically is just perfect. Now, I have another one on standby because I do use this one a lot also for the same purpose, and this is a Koyudo brush, an eyeshadow, all blue squirrel. It's dome shaped, very different from the Houkodou brush, right? Houkodou brush is flat on both sides, pinched ferrule. Here from the Koyudo, you have a round ferrule. If you have delicate eyes and you need something softer than Canadian Squirrel, then I would suggest blue squirrel. But the way this deposit colors on the outer lid, in the softest way, again, in the same fashion, just tap the color here and the softness from the blue squirrel will just blend it on its own. You don't need to swirl and twirl. You don't need to do anything nuts. Just tap the color here on the outer lid. You could even pull it softly on the outer quarter of your lower lash line if you want to wrap that shadow around the corner. It's so beautifully soft. And again, what comes to mind, Suku shadows, where you just use one or two or all four if you want it from the quad, and just the tap, flick, and whatever, you're done. you're done. Now for more detailed work, I do have Sonia G's Builder Pro. This is, I believe, dyed goat hair, flat on both sides, not as fluffy as the Houkodou brush. You can see the difference in density, length, and just thickness here. But the Builder Pro is going to carve out any metallic placement here on the lid. If you want a more carved out shape from your metallic shadow, then you can use the tip of the Builder Pro to kind of shape it. Also, wiggling this brush back and forth in the pan will deposit really nice color here on the lid. If you wanted a heavier duty serving from a metallic shadow, you could do that on the lid. Also using this to place color more precisely, in fact, than the Houkodou brush or even the Koyudo brush under your lash line so the color stays tighter there. I would even argue for your inner corner. Now, inner corner, without a doubt, you knew I was going to say this brush. Rephr number 3. One of the best pencil brushes I have in my collection. It's small, but it's flexible. It's perfect, as I was just speaking about. Inner corner highlight if you want a more precise serving. Lower inner lash line placement if you wanted a punchier, more vibrant color. But what I love to use this with, and I hop between smaller shader brushes like Sonia's Flat Definer, as well as Chikuhodo's Takumi, this number, the T12. So you see, these are flat shaders that can very well take your favorite liner across the lash line, smoke it out, shape it out. I especially love the number 3 because the tip doesn't lose its shape. You could pull this through the lash line and the liner won't spread out too far. It will stay tight to the lash line, but the color will spread evenly out through the corner to shape the wing. But I understand it might be easier for one to use a flat shader brush because just placing it here on the lash line, it might feel more intuitive to use and to help you blend your liner. So that's why I wanted to present both shapes, because I get it. Holy Grail's makeup brushes, yes, I would argue the same for makeup because we all have different skin types and conditions and whatnot, but with brushes, I think the contours of your face, the shapes of your eyes will determine what your Holy Grails are. And I get it where when it comes to liner and more precise tasks for eyeshadows, Holy Grail is a little fluid, right? But again, Rephr number 3, inner corner highlighter, lower lash line pop, liner blending. Just so much. And I think that's it. These are my Holy Grail makeup brushes. Really hard. I can go back and forth all day about making changes to this list and having plenty of arguments as to why. But again, as I mentioned at the top of the video, if all of my other brushes vanished and I was just left with these, I'll be very happy. And with that said, let me know what your favorite Holy Grail makeup brushes are down below. Which ones I gotta keep my eye out for. But I make the investment because they are made to last if they are well taken care of. And I've just seen a steady change in my makeup application from when I started not using the best brushes, but that comes with the territory, right? You experiment, trial and error. Once I dove into Fude and used products that I haven't used in a long time, what have you, and even with my hyperpigmentation, the finish that these brushes leave on my skin is just beyond flawless. And the same thing with my eyeshadow. There's no muddying up, there's no splotchiness. It's just all smooth, blended, and blurred. And it's all due to these brushes. So again, let me know what your favorites are down below. I would love to know. I'll see you down in those comments. And until then, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. And until then, I will see you on here again with another review tutorial, Holy Grail something or another, maybe top 5 Pat McGrath eyeshadow palettes or monthly faves. Take care, and I will see you again soon.